I would venture to say that all of us have a mantra. That is a word or a phrase that guides us through life, keeping us stable, enabling us to live through the circumstances of whatever we find. We hear Jesus' own mantra as the gospel was proclaimed this morning. He says to his disciples, those closest to him, those ready to follow and emulate him, don't be afraid. In fact, this phrase of denying fear, of putting aside anxiety, is the most repeated phrase of the Gospels. Don't be afraid. Don't be anxious. We hear it once, twice, three, and more. And yet, we live in an age that far outstrips any historical age. The Dark Ages, the medieval age, the post-industrial World War age. Fear surrounds us. It threatens us. Terrorism, rising threats of war, even civil unrest, global warming, food and home insecurity, not distantly far from us, but in our own neighborhoods. Yes, pandemic disease, and ultimately for every one of us, death. If we were not afraid before, we are certainly encouraged to be fearful today, with social media bombarding us with either bad news internationally or false information, feeding a narrative to buy, to get, to obtain, to possess, to win at the game of life. And then we return to Jesus' words. Don't be afraid. Dark comfort considering all this. However, it really is a genuine comfort if we set our aspirations, our hopes, our abilities and desires in line with God's desire for us, willing to be a recipient of God's gracious and abiding love for the likes of us human beings who are all too ready to live in the mundane and simplicity of self rather than in the complexity and hopes of the Spirit. We are offered the truth of conviction and right action as we do not enhance ourselves alone, as we are willing to transform all of God's creation. And this is only possible if we take seriously our baptismal vows to uplift the dignity of every human being, to uphold the wisdom of ancient traditions, to speak for the voiceless, to act for human creativity and a shared commitment for the common good, especially the care of the weakest, the challenged, the impoverished. All of these actions being under assault daily by shallow, narcissistic values and a false narrative of defeating and denigrating others to place ourselves in the win column. The late Peruvian theologian Gustavo Gutierrez, the father of liberation theology, once asked a lacerating question that we might also consider. He asks, how do you tell a poor person that God loves them? In my own experience, I was confronted with this very question as a prison chaplain. Easter was approaching. It was the middle of Holy Week. And there I was on the third tier at the Maryland House of Correction. I walked into that cell that morning, that cell 6x9, and I met, you might say, a young man, but barely, 19 years old. He'd been pulled over and stopped, searched, and in his car, they found a small measure of cocaine. There are two things you don't ask. You don't ask, what are you in for? You don't ask, how long? But in our conversation, he revealed all this to me and then said, and I'm in for a minimum of 15 years. I'm 19 years old. And he went on to say, I told my wife with our newborn child that she has to get a divorce. She needs to get on with her life because this is my life. 6x9. He was alone and he was afraid. He was, as we say, doing the time, surviving. And all I could do was to listen, to be attentive to him in that moment. And then I found that my tears of sadness began to mingle with his tears of remorse. Don't be afraid. Please don't be afraid. God loves and cares for you. And so do I. I can't go to the warden. I can't ask for a change of venue. I can't ask for a change of sentence. But I'm here, and you're here. And I'm telling you, don't be afraid, because I know God is here. We embraced, and then I left to go on to the next cell. My prayer that day and onward was that he somehow would put aside that fear and receive the glory and the joy of the resurrection yet to be. Being rich toward God and to God's people is not just about sizable sums that we put back in that offering bowl. It's not about the church having a better business strategy. But it is about putting aside our fears and being rich towards God in an orientation towards a whole of life and receiving an abundant gift from a generous God and being ready to share that. My good friend and former bishop, the late Bishop Jack Spong, had a word that he loved to use. And he would say this: live, love, wastefully, for the sake of God and each other. In other words, live in a generosity of spirit that opens us to being reflections of the divine generosity a divine generosity that negates our propensity to be afraid, to outstretch our hands, but only with clenched fists, to hold tight to what we have, to fight against any and all who stand against what we want, what we demand, what we shall have. And so Jesus speaks to us again. Sell possessions, give alms, create an unfailing treasure, be ready for action, be attentive to the other. So the question for us this day is a simple but lacerating one. Do we want to live lives of taking, of getting over, of winning at every cost? Or shall we live lives of giving and sharing and generosity that reflects truly whom we are called to be into God's love? The answer we hold in ourselves will reveal the truth of our heart and will open us or close us to the blessing of God already upon us. A possible definition of human sin lies in the words of Jesus this day, as we choose to embrace and live in a belief that giving, rather than taking, will only lead to destitution and deprivation and desperation. No. The gospel promises far different story than that. The gospel tells us that giving and sharing and caring outside of ourselves will actually make us more mindful of God's blessing, and then therefore make within us a readiness to receive and employ God's gifts of discernment and hope, grounded in a wastefulness, an ever-growing generosity of self and resources. In denying fear, Jesus points us to the truth that the less we hold on to, the less we need fear. The less we need to fear, the more we shall know a life of giving that moves us away from a perceived brink of mayhem and destruction to the brink of blessing, where we can more readily hear his promise that the Son of Man is coming at an unexpected hour, desiring not to punish, but to bless. And so, my friends, live wastefully as God, unconditionally, wholeheartedly, without reserve, wastefully loves us.